what's up everybody? It's Mr. Pratt here, and this is Memory. So as you know, I'm always bringing you accessible, modifiable, and engaging content for in the classroom, at home, and in the gym. And today's game is a classic twist on the common card game Memory. So if you're not aware of the classic card game Memory, it's a simple premise. You put down a deck of cards face down, you can't see the numbers, you have to try and flip cards 2 at a time to find matches. If you find a match, you get to keep the 2 cards and keep going. Now when I play Memory in the gym, I love it first and foremost because it's a great team building game. I play it in small groups where students are having to work with each other, communicate with each other to solve their grid as quick as they possibly can and find the most matches that their team can. This is a game that's going to force you to communicate with each other, resolve disputes, show leadership, followership, and all kinds of other life skills that are important, not just in Phys Ed, but in the outside world and in the classroom as well. It's also a great game for helping students work on self-regulation. They're going to have a lot of information that they're going to need to block out to focus on the task at hand. They're also going to have to work on that short-term memory to make sure they remember where blocks are within the grid. And the last reason I love it is, of course, like most of my content, it's extremely modifiable. There's about 5 or 6 different ways I've played Memory, and I'm going to try and walk you through them in the video to come. So in its simplest form, you can set Memory up as I have it here. You're going to have one team lined up behind the cone over here. I've used a cone for video purposes, so it's an easy visual, but if it was actually in the Phys Ed class, I'd probably just use a spot marker, otherwise students are always bumping into the cone. Now with your team lined up behind the cone, they are going to work on the grid that's in front of them. And it's important to note that I've used a 4x4 grid today. There's 16 cups, meaning there's 8 different matches within those 16 cups, but you don't have to start with 16. You could start really small by using a 3x3 grid with one shape that doesn't match another shape, or you could just simply have 8 cups lined up to have 4 simple matches for younger students to keep it simple. Your grid could, in theory, get as big as you want it to make it more complex and more difficult for different students of differing abilities. Now, if you're playing Memory in its most basic form, here's how it's going to work. The first person on your team is going to be lined up behind the cone, and when it's their turn, or when the game starts, they're going to run up to the grid. Their job is to flip 2 cups at a time. I've used cups, could be pylons, could be cones, whatever you have available to you. They're going to flip 2 cups. Their job is to try and find a match. So if I flip 2 cups, underneath the cups are going to be 2 shapes. In this case, these aren't exact matches. For the first way I play Memory, this is no good, okay? I don't have a match. I'm going to have to put them back, hide them again under my cups. I'm going to run back, tag off one of my teammates, and they're going to come at the grid. We didn't find a match, but we now have some information. We got a red bridge shape and a green bridge shape. My partner is going to come, and let's say they are able to find a match. So they turn 2 cups, they know I got a red bridge here. Let's say they start with this one. Oh, they found a red bridge shape. They know one red bridge shape is over here. Their teammates could be communicating that to them because this is a teamwork and communication game. And if they're successful in flipping it and finding a match, they can keep this match. They're going to leave the cups overturned like this so everybody knows there's no more shapes inside of them. They're going to take the shapes back to their team, tag off, and the next person's going to go. They're going to continue on in this pattern until they found all the matches as quickly as they can. So because this is kind of branded as a team building cooperative game, I make sure students are aware of that and that I'm encouraging them to communicate with their teammates. So just because it's my turn and I'm the one who's physically going to the grid, when I get up there, I'm going to communicate with my teammates if I feel I need to. So if I turn a shape, and let's say it's a green square, and my teammates know where another green square is, they're going to have to try and communicate that with me. But I do not allow other students to come up to the grid, because that's going to force us to have good communication in a chaotic space. So there's a lot of stress, there's a lot going on, and these are the times we really learn how to communicate and work as a team. Now in this version of memory, they could be racing a clock, making this not a competitive game, but kind of strictly a teamwork game where they're working with their own team to try and find the matches as quick as they can. You could also make it so there's multiple teams working on multiple different grids throughout your playing area to see who finishes first and have the students kind of competing against each other in that way. This is memory in its simplest form. One way you can modify memory, and this really gets students' brains working, is to make it so the matches don't have to be exact. So in this case, these are the exact same size, the exact same shape, the exact same color. 2 red bridges. But as you saw in the grid earlier, there's actually a green bridge under this cup. So if you want to get students working on some cognitive flexibility, really keeping them awake and kind of switching up the game to keep it interesting and engaging for them, you can start to allow different types of matches. So the next time you play this game, maybe students are allowed to find shapes that aren't the same color, but are the same shape or the same size. You're going to have to modify the game how you see fit and to meet the level of challenge that you need with students. I always recommend starting small with the basics, and the more you play this game, the more challenging you can make it, the more modifications you're going to need to keep it interesting and engaging. And if you're doing the version where you just have one team on one grid, another way I've modified this is to have what I call a grid master. So somebody's standing at the top of the grid from each team, and their teammates come up, and the grid master's not allowed to physically touch the cups, but they are allowed to give information to their teammates. So they've been standing at the grid the whole time, and their other teammates are the ones trying to run and find the matches. The grid master can give them information. This kind of forces the grid master into a leadership position where they're giving information to their teammates, and their teammates have to either choose to listen or kind of go rogue and not take the advice of their grid master. So this is a bit more of forced leadership, but sometimes I find that effective for getting kids outside of their comfort zone and really encouraging them to speak up and take a leadership role. You also might have some students shine in that role that don't shine, say, in traditional team sports. Now usually the first way I modify memory to make it a little bit different is to do 2 teams on the same grid. So my team would be trying to race to find as many matches as we can to beat this team. Okay, they'd be doing the same thing. And in this case, we're working on the same grid. So if I come and I flip a cup, and I'm looking for a match to my red bridge, and the other team happens to flip this cup, and I see their red bridge, I can quickly steal that match. They still have 1 cup to flip, I still have 1 cup to flip. So I can flip another one, they flip another one. Okay, there's no match there. It's a yellow square and a green bridge. We both have flipped 2 cups. Our turn is over. Gotta remember to leave those overturned or they'll get everywhere. Okay, and then we run back and we tag off. We don't have to be going at the same time, obviously, because my team's trying to go faster than the other team. But in this case, you're working the same grid. Everybody still gets to flip 2 cups on their turn, but you can steal those matches. You can also, of course, be gaining information from the team who's working on the same grid. So while you're having your turn, your teammates could be watching what the other team is flipping and overturning, and you're going to have students with great memories starting to memorize what shapes are where in the grid really quick. Now if you're working with younger students or it's seeming a little too complex, you can also modify memory to be a little bit simpler so that when I have my turn and I flip 2 cups, I'm allowed to leave 1 overturned so the information stays there instead of in my memory. So when I run up for my turn and I flip 2 cups, okay, these are not a match if we're going for exact match. I'm going to be able to put 1 cup back up and leave this cup overturned. So my next teammate who goes, when I tag them off, my next teammate's going to go, and they still get to overturn 2 cups, but there's already 1 cup overturned. So if they're more likely to find a match in this case. But so is the other team if you're competing. Now that last modification I showed you could also be done in the original version of memory where you just have 1 team working on a single grid. Especially when you're first starting, sometimes it helps to let students leave that 1 cup overturned as they'll make matches a little bit quicker. Now moving on, yet another way you can modify memory You can set it up as head-to-head grids. So 2 teams are facing off against each other. Just these 2 teams. They're not competing against anybody else. You can have a couple pairs of grids set up throughout your gym so it works for your whole class. Another alternative would be they could actually work on both grids, where you'd have students being able to steal matches from one another's grids and find matches within their own grids. So in that case, you're going to get a lot more movement. In theory, you could even have 2 more teams on the other side, and you could have 4 teams working on the same grid, and you make your grid even bigger. Now, one of the beauties of playing in this head-to-head format is when you finish a round, this team can go and scramble that team's grid to start the next game, and this team can go and scramble that team's grid. You keep the same pieces in there, and they're going to look for the same matches, but it doesn't require the teacher to have to reset it up every time. As I said, this is one of the reasons I love memory, because depending on your setup and your time and your equipment available, you can modify it to fit your group size and the age you teach really, really well. I've done this game with grade 1s, I've also done it with grade 8s, where it's lasted multiple classes over multiple weeks. If you modify this a little bit every day, you're going to keep it fresh, you're going to keep them engaged, they're going to know the pattern of the game, and they're always going to be ready for the next challenge. Now, another modification that's important to note, of course, I've used little plastic cups and foam blocks. A great way to make this game work in the classroom, or bring some classroom content into the gymnasium or out on the field, is to use different cards underneath the cups or the cones that you use. You could have students using actual playing cards and playing more like the traditional card game of memory. You could have math tiles under there, or dominoes under there, and you could have matches be different sums. For example, if there's a domino that has a 6 and a 2 on it, and you're working on addition, that's 8. They could find a match with a 4 and a 4 domino, and they're working on sums, working on some classroom content, while they're also working on moving their body and kind of exercising their brain as well. Other ways you can incorporate some more subjects for some literacy. You could have words and definitions under there. You could have animals and the sounds they make. You could have letters and a word associated with a letter. You could even connect social studies and history in this. You could have a date under one cup and an event that matches that date. And of course, simple ways to modify this for Phys Ed purposes beyond teamwork and the great game that it already is. You can have students doing different locomotions to and from the grid, whether they're skipping or hopping or doing lunges. As they move back and forth, you're going to get them working on different exercises. Animal walks is a great one for younger students. They're going to love that as they move towards the grid as well. Under the cups, you could even have different movements, right? If they find a match, let's say there's jumping jacks and jumping jacks under 2 cups, they have to do 5 jumping jacks before they're allowed to go for the next match. All right, everyone, so that about does it for memory. This is a great adaptation of a traditional card game that's very well known. It's an awesome way to get students working on their physical fitness and being active, also working on that mental capacity, that the social emotional learning that happens with teamwork and team building and communication. And it's a great way to embed some cross-curricular content and learning within your Phys Ed class as well. If you're a fan of this game, I actually got this game from a company called Everactive Schools, who has a great free resource on their webpage called Games and Activities for Self-Regulation. There's a whole bunch of different games like this. I've featured a few in my other videos. One is called Rubik's Cube. The other is called Sophie's Tower. They're both games from the same resource. So if you want to check that out, be sure to click the link in the description and it'll take you to that resource. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and this game, please hit that subscribe button down there and make sure you sign up for notifications so you see my weekly videos. I'd appreciate it if you liked this video, share it if you have colleagues who would benefit from it, and make sure to leave me a comment on how you've used the game in your context below. But for now, this is Mr. Pratt signing off from memory.